Alright guys, Brian Dunn here, continuing with Amazon Web Services configuration. So at this point we have a user that we've configured and we have applied a group policy to that user that allows them full access to Amazon S3. Now, if we're part of an organization, we might not necessarily want that because the person that's going to be using these credentials inside of Spinjutsu, you might not want them to have access to all of your other buckets. Maybe you want them to have access only to the specific bucket that you're going to upload these S3 feeds to. We can do that, and we're going to do it by creating a special policy. Here in Identity and Access Management, while we're on the Users tab now, down here under Policies is where we're going to create a special policy that will apply to the bucket. Before we can do that though, we have to create the actual bucket itself. So let's switch over to S3 so that we can go ahead and create the bucket that we're going to use. I'm going to click on Services. I'm just going to search for S3. S3 is going to load. I'm going to create a new bucket. Create bucket. Bucket names are essentially root folders within your S3 account. No two people can have the same bucket names. Every single bucket name must be unique within AWS. So sometimes you might have to test different combinations to get one that you like that's going to work for your purpose. In this case, we're only doing a test. So I'm going to call this RSS test example. We'll cross our fingers that nobody else has used that yet. I'm going to click Next. I'll use the default options on this tab for now. Set permissions. Manage public permissions. Grant public read access to this bucket. Okay, so let's click Next. We're going to do a quick review, make sure that everything says what we want, and we're going to create that bucket. Now, RSS test example, there we go. There's our bucket, and you can see the bucket itself has public read permissions. Now, we need to remember what this bucket name is. So I'm going to copy this text because I'm going to need that for something that we're going to do in just a moment. So you'll want to do the same thing. Copy that and paste it somewhere else and keep it handy. Now that we have our bucket created, what we're going to do is modify permissions of the user that we just created so that that user has access only to this one bucket, and they will not be able to access any other buckets in our S3 account. I need to go back into IAM. We're going to create a policy. Policies. Create policy. We're going to enter raw JSON code. I'm going to delete what's here. In the members area, I'll have this code for you available. I'm going to paste in some code. And I'm going to change this word test to the name of the bucket that we just created, and I have to change it in both places that it appears. Change test to whatever the name of your bucket is. That's going to allow, when we apply this policy to that user, it's going to say that that user is allowed to list this and only this S3 bucket, and it is allowed to put, get, and delete objects only in this S3 bucket. It won't be allowed any access to any other S3 buckets. We're going to review the policy. We need to give it a name. Okay, we can't have any spaces here. And create policy. All right, we have now created the policy. Now, let's go to the user. User Spinjutsu. We need to add a policy to it that we just created. Let's see. I don't recall which of these that we use for that, so we're going to experiment and find out. We could have done that here if we wanted to. That's okay. Add permissions. Let's see here. Attach existing policies directly. We search for our policy. Here. Now we're going to review. So what it's going to do, this is a summary, is it's going to apply the policy that we just created to the user Spinjutsu. Now I'm going to click Add Permissions. There we go. Now user Spinjutsu should only have access to the bucket RSS test example and no other buckets. So we've effectively restricted permissions on this user so that we can now safely use this within the Spinjutsu program and not be terribly worried about who else might have access to those credentials by viewing them inside of the Spinjutsu application.